Cuphead is like no other, man. It just screams 1930s nostalgia with the gorgeous art style, the gloved hands the characters have, and the present themes. When I first saw footage of it, I interpreted it as a Mario game that was almost all boss levels. I wasn't really spot on with that, but the bosses are certainly the selling point of the game. Each one is so unique and has their own story to tell. So here we're ranking every single one, not really based on difficulty because that's a video for another day, but based on creativity, the fun factor, and mechanically how interesting they are. We're starting at the B tier since all bosses are charming and have redeeming qualities, and yeah, let's do this. Beppy the Clown does not appeal to me. If we're being dramatic, this is indeed what I consider to be the worst boss in Cuphead. This whole battle is just generic carnival stuff that goes with the Inkwell Isle 2 theme, and compared to the other two bosses available when starting this section of the game, I always pick Beppy last. Nothing personal, man. Off the top of my head, this battle could have been done better by reworking the roller coaster. It could have instead been a ride around the carnival, positioning us into different sections for each phase of the boss fight. More attractions would have heightened the stakes too, like adding in a funhouse section, or getting us on the Ferris wheel that overlooks the carnival. This boss fight was a decent idea that was not used to its fullest potential.
You like jazz?
Now, isn't that fitting to have the B in the B tier? This isn't overwhelmingly bad or anything, because there's a lot of good. I liked the phase where she whipped out her magic book and started spawning stuff in, and her turning into a plane is a really great transformation, but constantly having to jump up to stay afloat, and these depressed worker bees are killing the vibe. I know this is a really on-the-nose reference to the 9-to-5 workday that became mainstream in the 1920s, but man, I'm playing a video game right now. I don't want to think about work. Honestly, the greatest aspect of the boss fight is probably the music, but I don't think the music alone justifies putting this boss into a higher position.
Hey, Lola.
I guess I have a thing against bugs, because I consider these guys the worst boss of the delicious last course. Personally, the whole mob aesthetic just doesn't catch my interest, and there being a million little things going on is just annoying in the first phase. The bombs, the police, the little guys, the caterpillar thrown in. The funniest part is when he's on the phone sometimes and it sounds like he's saying, "Kill your family!" I will say I like it better as the battle goes on, and I totally recognize that it has one of the coolest final phases for giving us the fake out. The intro dialogue being unique to this boss is another plus as well, but compared to everything else, I rarely choose to play this one. Our first seasonally themed boss to appear is the Ice Wizard. Here he floats around back and forth as the face of this whole snowy world, with this big snow monster that goes and this audience of snowmen in the background, and a big fridge. The boss himself looks really similar to Adventure Time's Ice King, plus they both are ice wizards. Whether this is a big coincidence or a character straight up inspired by the show, I have no idea, but it's interesting nonetheless. Anyways, the final phase really feels like a finale, breaking us out of that snowy coliseum and showcasing the beautiful Arctic sky. It actually reminds me of the transition from the Saltbaker battle too. Also, this place has no penguins. The only ones in the game are in the Clown's Carnival. I just thought that was interesting. And my final random thought is that it's a great contribution to the snowy worlds in gaming. Overall, it's a good boss fight.
B545. What beanstalk you fall from?
There is a lot to like with Glumstone the Giant. Each phase of this is great and compelling. You got these gnomes making a potion in his mouth. Then he's playing with these puppets of King Dice and the Devil. That's an awesome connection to the main story. And then you get eaten and have to fight the uvula. Very, very creative. The background with the mountains is really cool, and if you pay attention, those mountains are actually other giants. This was definitely a tough one for me, a worthy challenger. It was mostly difficult because of the ridiculous little gnomes. Only with this giant, I feel ungrateful for ranking him lower, but to me, there genuinely are so many better bosses in this game. Sorry, Glumstone. I gotta say, these doggies are pretty cool. Our little pilot friend is here. The main enemy reminds me of Spike from Tom and Jerry. The overall dog theme of this battle is charming, and the puppies in the second phase are cute. I mean, they literally bark out little bow wows at you. Very clever overall, but there is a big flaw though. In the final phase, the boss will do something unique and tilt the screen to make it harder for you. But I always just tilt my head in response and beat it no problem. It defeats the whole challenge, and while it was a good gimmick to try out, there are better ones used down the line that are actually challenging and increase the stress of the final phase. And that would have been all I had to say until I saw that there's a secret phase here. This is so cool. If you don't shoot the puppies barking at you, they get picked up by the big dog and they all attack you together. This was so well hidden and neat. My opinion on this boss fight had definitely elevated when I found that out. Good stuff.
My last name?
Yes.
Imagine Dragon.
I'm gonna back up.
Imagine Dragon D's nuts on your face.
Let me get the positives out of the way now. That spinning castle in the background is cool as hell. I love backdrops like that in this game. And behind the scenes, it looked really charming too. The fireballs jumping off his tongue and being like little people is very cute, very charming. And the third phase is rainy and glorious with the storm going on. Outside of all of that, fuck this guy. Most difficult boss battle in the whole game, don't at me. What a challenge this is. That last phase is unbearable with those fire bubbles that can be popped. It would have been childish to put this last just because it's difficult, because at the end of the day, that's what this game is known for. But my gosh, I respect you, Dragon, for challenging me so, but at the same time,
Pokemon Go suck my balls!
Roses are red. Violets are blue. Yo.
At the top of the B tier, we have everyone's favorite flower, Cagney Carnation. And I mean everyone, since it's this boss's music that they decided to put into Smash Bros. With the different phases and unique attacks used against Cuphead, it's an all-around good boss fight inspired by the typical lively flowers of 1930s animation. This seems to be the face of basic boss fights in Cuphead, and it makes complete sense to me. It's nice and grassy and gives off that World 1 vibe. The final phase has this great heightened stress with the flower becoming crazy looking with the flashing eyes, and it's spitting out the little things that drug you and mess with the screen is super cool. And before we move on to the A tier, we're going to take a quick look at all those mini-bosses from the run and gun levels. And I just gotta say that these levels are a really good addition to the prominent bosses of each world. These were challenging with the amount of enemies and projectiles present, and further established the world Cuphead and Mugman live in. Let's get to it. Look at this thing, it's freaking sick! He has such a cool design, but typically I only see his dead body. It can be cheesed so easily, so while he is creative, he is mechanically useless, so his existence is pointless. But if he wasn't able to be defeated so easily, it would give me enough time to enjoy looking at him. I like his animation of him just waving around in place there. Oh well. This cannon wall is in no way cooler than the previous guy we were just looking at. The difference though is that they actually are a roadblock in your way and have been shooting cannonballs at you for the past 20 seconds of gameplay. I like the parrying opportunities as well, and in the end, no, they are not that exciting, but they serve their purpose at least. These mouth walls from Inkwell Isle 2 are a bit more exciting than the cannons, plus they have cars coming out of their mouths. The vibe here is joyful in a weird way, and they try to attack you with little kisses, isn't that cute? It's also a rewarding feeling to defeat the wall and go through its gaping mouth. It's a unique detail only relevant with these enemies. Inkwell Isle 1's Acorn Maker boss is a pretty silly and creative one. I like the little flower guy cranking the machine. The acorns themselves are menacing, and kind of like the cannon walls, this machine has been sending evil acorns your way for a while before you got to it, so it's a worthy opponent. These tubas are funny. There's a few of them throughout the level in Inkwell Isle 2, and they certainly do their job of trying to stop you in your tracks, and I like when they do the Their death animations are great too, reminds me of the genies actually. But my favorite part of these guys? Their little mustaches. Exquisite little gentlemen. The Dragonfly in Inkwell Isle 1 honestly isn't too creative or interesting, but I give him major points for being the first mini-boss that actually feels like it has that boss status, with it being the final threat of the level before you complete it. He could also be thought of as the big papa of the little guys that have been holding these leaves. All he does is shoot fireballs, but the battle is entertaining and defeating him is satisfying. The Lobster Man at the Perilous Piers is annoying, just like he should be. A powerful entity capable of shooting lightning at you with the hand clap, and he has a really cool little beard and hat. When he moves around, he swims with his arms like the majestic creature he is. Defeating him is almost upsetting, watching him hold his hands up to his face and splash down into the water. His character design appears friendly, but in this scenario, he is not. This literal mountain lion is a great threat to the player, with it being so big that it's hard to simply jump over him, and his placement right next to this annoying goat throwing pickaxes adds to the pain and suffering. This is also one of the only enemies in the game to push you with wind, and it is especially a hassle to deal with in this scenario. And in the same level, we have the Cyclops, easily one of the most creative mini-bosses in the game, with the sassy way he moves his hands while chasing you, and how he stares at you with his big menacing eye before he comes out. It is also very funny when he slips. Appearance-wise, he really could have been made into a true boss with the addition of a few phases. So yeah, the Cyclops is fantastic, but there is one more mini-boss that's even better. At last, we have made it to the hot dog, the obvious wiener. This is the best character conceptually, hands down. I mean, it's a hot dog. He falls perfectly with the theme of the level, plus he shoots condiments at you while you're making your way towards him. And when defeated, bites get taken out of him. So cool. Now that that's all done, it's time for the A tier, which includes more remarkably creative bosses. The Cowgirl boss is proof that the DLC blends in perfectly with the main game. The first phase includes so many ideas that are a part of the Western theme, with the desert backdrop, the snake oil, and the occasional cactus being thrown in, and the vulture, the boss herself being in a saloon. So many little things that contribute to it like pieces of a bigger puzzle. It's chaotic with so much being on screen, but something about it to me is done better here than this kind of chaos. Anyways, my favorite aspect of the fight is the progression. She goes from being a rambunctious cowgirl to this sausage link creature spitting meat out at you, and finally a canned food. If that doesn't excellently showcase how wacky this game can be, then I don't know what does.
This is the sound of a robot.
A good example of how hard this game can get, the mad scientist and his robot make for a memorable fight that spices up the roster. That first phase is especially unique for being the only time in the game where you can choose the order in how you damage the boss. Throughout the battle, you'll see these big bomb missiles that are difficult to deal with among the other threats present. The final phase is very interesting for actually having the foreground be a problem. It can seriously get in your line of sight sometimes. The junkyard theme sticks out here and is cool to see when comparing it to the sea levels and grassy levels of the game. And finally, I like when he's defeated because all his clothes blow away and he gets flabbergasted and it's funny.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hildeberg is a wild boss fight. Starting off with her name, it's an obvious reference to the historic Hindenburg Zeppelin. She's this lady who laughs at you with her little The laughs turning into text that potentially do damage to you is so cool. And look at her on her little unicycle. She looks so goofy. She's got her zodiac phases. I like when the bull goes, The two spinning ladies aren't too bad, but the Sagittarius phase is total madness on expert mode with the blue stars consistently following you. After all that, the big finale of her turning into the moon is super unique. Great vibe, the boss is fun, it feels special, very wacky.
Oh, have you not heard? It was my understanding that everyone had heard.
Heard what? Brian, don't!
Oh, well, a bird.
This is our fourth plane level in a row, but this is a classic Cuphead boss. You're just bound to be if you have a name like Wally Warbles. The battle begins with him as a cuckoo clock going off. His baby bird minions that have nails on their heads are absolutely adorable. That first phase, and really all the phases here, are tough at first, but are easy to catch on to and learn. The music having a little Ride of the Valkyrie segment in there adds to the magic and stimulation. And the absolute best part of this boss is when you defeat him on the last phase, and his little buddies put salt and pepper on him while they lick their lips. Magnificent, and a satisfying win. Moving on.
I will take you to the candy shop and let you lick the lollipop.
The Candy Lady and her friends were a hard bunch to defeat. I remember spending a whole night trying to finish the boss fight, and I like how it operated with there being different characters coming in each phase, and the finale being the Candy Lady herself, who was inspired by Marie Antoinette, who said, "Let them eat cake," and her head was cut off by a guillotine in real life, which is why the Candy Lady's head comes off. Man, very on-the-nose historical reference there. So good. And like a lot of the bosses in this game, the final animation is great with Candy Lady and her castle being upset like sore losers. Oh, and the music was awesome. This was a good concept aided by a good execution. The Genie is a solid boss and one of the great faces of Inkwell Isle 2. It's a battle that's challenging yet fair with this great spinning pyramid backdrop. Like I mentioned earlier, out of all of the backdrops in the whole game, it's typically the spinning ones I like best. I really like the phase where it's navigating through pillars, just because it feels so satisfying destroying his little face and shimmying through these to stay alive. Another major plus is that this is one of the only bosses in the game with a secret phase. If the Genie scans you while you're tiny, the rest of the battle will play out differently. It's cool to see that they put in that extra effort to make this special. Heck yeah. Oh, and his defeated animation is great too. And before we continue with the A tiers, we're going to be going over the casino bosses. Since they are all one phase long, it made the most sense to put them in their own category. And with that, let's get started. Starting with the worst of the casino bosses, we have this lady. Why is she the worst, you ask? Oh, because all she does is dance around back and forth and occasionally drop little balls. What I do like, though, are the gloved hands in the background. Knowing how notoriously hard it is to draw hands, I appreciate their presence very much. You see, in Cuphead, even the worst bosses grace us with beautiful art. Moving on, we've got this battle with the 8-ball, which has this overall pool theme. The backdrop of this fight gives off the vibe that we are in a sort of magical realm with the floating pool balls and a design that looks like the Northern Lights. This theme isn't bad. I think it just could have been executed better because all of this only culminated in a floating 8-ball and squares passing by. Not too exciting. The 8-ball's appearance is kind of uncanny with that mouth there too. And again, the idea of this boss is solid, it just wasn't done justice here, in my opinion. The domino battle has an effective claustrophobic atmosphere, and it feels like a more intimate battle with the enemy being so close. Cuphead versus the domino duo. The little domino ducks add to the difficulty as well in a good way. Oh, and the animation when they're defeated is just fantastic. Here we have the bunny, a wacky character with some great animations, good voice lines, and surprisingly sharp teeth. The backdrop with the playing cards is pretty atmospheric, and his move that involves the skulls is actually really difficult to deal with, especially when playing with another person. When defeated, we get rewarded with a great little dying animation, and yeah, good stuff. Next up, we have the Tipsy Troupe, a trio of alcoholic drinks which are pretty solid. I like their appearances a lot, especially the little guy with his big nose and mustache. And functionally, I like how the battle begins with us being attacked in 3 different ways, but as the bosses are defeated one by one, the correlated attacks will also dissipate. Neat little battle. Plus, the background gives us that subtle reminder that we are indeed in Inkwell Hell with the demons and skeletons all about. Ah, we've made it to my favorite stack of chips. You might be wondering, how did Chips Bedigan rank so high, a character who simply goes back and forth, when I ranked this lady so low? Well, he's got a nice little hat on, so yeah, that should be more than enough. But seriously, the way he moves back and forth at least has some variety to it, and similar to the background of the previous boss fight, these snazzy skeletons give us that subtle reminder that we are in the Inkwell Hell Casino, and it's a great aesthetic. Plus, he has some voice lines, a very nice element of the character. Here we have Mr. Wheezy, the final boss of the roster with the basic function of going left and right. But this guy is awesome with his little mustache and the gap between his teeth. With all this fire, the casino boss contributes to the setting of hell the most. And my favorite aspect of this is that he begins the battle with King Dice in his lighter and ends the battle being stomped out by him. A great reminder that Dice is the one in charge here. Next up, we have Fear Lap, the skeleton horse boss fight. This is just a really fun battle that's a good challenge with the presents being thrown at you and the ghosts coming up from the racing horses. And I'm repeating myself here, pointing out the death animations, but I like this guy with him holding up his money. This animation and his visor adds to the idea of betting, a casino staple. We've finally made it to King Dice himself, the devil's right-hand man that we've been seeing throughout the whole game. Finally getting to battle him is really cool, with his evil green glowing eyes and his very lively gloved hands. With the walking cards, it was also very difficult to stay alive in this battle. At least for me, there was a learning curve. And the death animation, freaking great here, with his sad, tired eyes. While King Dice is great, there's actually one casino boss that outdoes him and the rest. A really clever battle that deserves more recognition. At number 1, we have none other than Mr. Chimes. This fight is so freaking cool. First of all, we're in a claw machine. I love claw machines. You can see all the toys at the bottom. Seeing the outside of the claw machine helps give that impression that we are currently shrunken down. And the greatest thing about this is it playing out like a matching game. If you fail a match, Mr. Chimes will begin to speed up, and every correct match will have you fight him with his monkey noises and clashing cymbals. This is a battle so fun and creative that I wish it could have been played outside of King Dice's fight. Like, once the game is over, we should be able to handpick casino battles to replay. But again, great little boss fight, 10 out of 10. And now it's about time we return to the real bosses with the rest of the A tiers. Starting with...
Patrick, look! Peg legs and eye patches!
It feels like a full house at the pier fighting Mr. Pirate Man and his ship. Getting the negative out of the way, the music here is not nearly as iconic as some of the other boss tracks in the game. I don't mean to diss the overall battle though, it's still a fun fight at the end of the day. There's the occasional octopus that sprinkles drops of ink all over the place, which if touched could even mess with the screen temporarily. That treasure chest is effectively annoying and is a big contributor to the battle's challenge. I like the sound effects present throughout, and the last phase really feels like a finale with the angry monster boat. The lovely mermaid, the only boss in the game with the unique effect of turning you into stone. Unfortunately, like the pirate, this battle is also accompanied by music that is weaker among the assortment of songs present in the game. There's a lot of good that makes up for it though, and I didn't want to rank any bosses lower or higher solely for their music here. That may be a video for another day, actually. Anyways, there's a great variety of sea creatures that are a part of the battle, and I'm a fan of it all. I like the little turtle with his fists up, I like the little seahorse down there too, and her character design is great with the octopus on her head that has the tentacles which eventually turn into snakes later on. I like how she has her hands going back and forth like she's dancing, and the Medusa vibe of the last two phases is awesome.
Ooh, boy, who let the frogs out?
Ribby and Croaks, a great duo from Inkwell Isle 1 that in many ways references Street Fighter. Very nice. In general, I like boss fights that involve multiple characters or a group of them, so this one is right up my alley. I especially enjoyed it when the guy on the right turned into a fan. It's funny to see the big guy eating the little guy to turn into the slot machine. The music of this level definitely gives off the vibe that there's trouble. I like it a lot. Great battle. I like these two in the back, very cartoony. Some of the best background characters. I like Ribby and Croaks in the Netflix show too. They sing.
We love you, mother.
Overall, these two are iconic, and I have great memories of being stuck on these guys during my first playthrough of the game.
Are you familiar with the term blue balls?
I'll admit that most people probably wouldn't have placed the Ruse with an Ooze boss fight so high, but there's just something about this little blue ball that really gets me. The music is great, kicking off in the beginning like this is going to be some sort of boxing match, a personal one-on-one battle. I like the very start when he acts like a little gentleman, taking off a part of his head like it's a hat. The gravestone phase definitely faked me out the first time I played. And with the forest background, it excellently gives off that grassy World 1 vibe. I am all for crazy, complicated boss fights, and I find myself enjoying the more simple ones as well.
Eat your vegetables!
Similar to the little blue guy, the root pack at the beginning of the game is a fight that really holds up even when compared to the more complex boss fights. And just like the blue ball, this also makes me think of the classic video game World 1 aesthetic with the nice blue sky and the greenery. Each phase is divided nicely in an obvious way, and it feels like the stakes are getting higher throughout the battle. The classic Cuphead charm is also very present here, with the onion crying, since that's what onions make people do, and there's the carrot with the powerful eyes, since the carrots are known to help eyesight. Implementing that kind of stuff into the fight was very clever. I like how the parry opportunities are represented as well, through the worms the potato shoots out, and the pink tears coming from the onion. And finally, like the genie and the dog fight, the root pack has a secret boss as well. By leaving the onion alone and not shooting, he'll go away all happy and the phase will be skipped over, and it'll switch to the carrot phase with a new little radish guy here to make things more difficult. It's a really cool addition to the already great boss fight that a majority of them do not offer.
Let's go on the toxic gossip train.
Spooky Train was an excellent concept, excellently executed. You start at the caboose fighting the eye ghost, who goes like, and he's actually one of the toughest phases of the whole fight in my opinion. But it then shifts over to the skeleton man, then these two monster brothers that enjoy barfing out electricity, and finally the head of the train itself that needs to be parried open to actually damage. Every phase works. There's a real sense of progression, like there's a journey being gone through, and all elements perfectly contribute to this spooky theme. The little pumpkins are great, the little ghosts that drop skulls are great. Honestly, this is so well done that I can see a whole Inkwell Isle dedicated to a Halloween theme one day. Good stuff. A superb finale to end Inkwell Isle 3 and move on to Inkwell Hell. And before we move on to the S tiers, we'll be looking over the King's Leap bosses. This was an awesome addition to the game consisting of parry-based bosses that contribute to a charming chess theme. Let's get into it. At number 5 we have the Pawns. Very annoying with their pink little ball heads. They don't seem to jump down in any order and just randomly drop when they choose to. I also like that the progression of this battle is visible, because as more pawns become headless, it becomes obvious which ones still need to be parried to complete the level. Next up we've got the Bishop fight, which I would consider pretty straightforward. You walk past the candles to turn them all off and parry the head that's been annoyingly floating around the whole time. This boss fight is totally fine, I just think the rest are more engaging than this one. This actually reminds me of those ghost houses that grant the supers. It's just walking back and forth with some parrying. The Rook is a unique boss fight from the bunch, with him embodying this executioner role that flings parryable floating heads at you. It's a really good challenge. I like that the battle begins with him daydreaming about a guillotine lady. It adds to the game's overall charm, and his death animation is memorable with him holding onto his fallen head. The big finale of the King's Leap is the Queen, this big evil lady who goes back and forth raining down treasure on the screen. The battle is good for feeling so threatening with all the danger, to the point that it feels like some of the traditional battles present in the game. The throne room backdrop with all the treasure perfectly contributes to the Queen's appearance and her attacks, and the usage of the cannons to take her down is an awesome gimmick. And you can't forget about these little mice on your side cranking up the cannons and cheering you on. We've now made it to the most interesting battle of King's Leap, the Knight. I was actually greatly annoyed with this boss originally, because I'd be fighting and he would always stand up and motion for me to come near him. But as soon as I understood that you have to stay closer to him throughout the battle, I appreciated this. It is a great test of patience, needing to wait for an opening to parry and get in some damage. Also, I just want to quickly point out how neat it is that each of these battles begin with an on guard instead of a wall up. It's a really subtle detail that makes this whole section stand out. Anyways, the character design on this guy perfectly showcases the cleverness of the game. All of these enemies were obviously based off of different chess pieces, with this one being the knight, and him being a knight horse is just perfect too. But my favorite aspect of the boss is how it feels very personal. A duel. A 1v1. Mano a mano. It's just me and you, horsey. Oh, and great death animation. Very satisfying to watch. But now it's time to check out the last bosses of our ranking. These 5 have achieved the beloved S tier for being above and beyond the best of the best.
Cream of the crop!
Let's begin.
Why don't you go talk to him?
Well, I don't know. There's a game on. Shame on you. You march right over there and cheer your old friend up. Don't listen to that sissy. Grab a beer and watch the game.
The implementation of the Angel and Devil boss fight is easily one of the coolest parts of the delicious last course. It greatly changes up the natural pacing by needing specific action in the overworld. After obtaining the broken relic and inputting the secret code with the tombstones, the beam of light appears, allowing Cuphead to nap and enter this strange world. Even the hourglass appears destroyed when loading into the fight. Like what? I love that. It gives off that impression that where we're going transcends time. The fight itself is well done, too, for only being one phase long, with the big gimmick being that the angel and devil switch places when Cuphead changes direction. Unbelievably creative. I want more like this.
Welcome to hell, mother...
We've now made it to the devil himself, the big bad who's the reason we've fought the bosses of the main game in the first place. I like the different forms the devil takes in Phase 1, adding to the concept that the devil is this dangerously powerful being. Throughout the battle, I like the appearance of his henchmen as well. They are just as annoying as they should be. I know the team at MDHR saved the devil for last, so they could use everything they learned to culminate in the best boss fight. But unfortunately, I do not consider it so. The first phase just doesn't feel wild and dangerous enough to be a worthy finale. There should be more fire, more suffering. It's the devil we're talking about here. That being said, I consider the battle way better once the devil jumps into the hole, reappearing in his bigger form. And my absolute favorite aspect of the whole battle? The very last phase. After all the pain and suffering the devil has put us through, we finally put the scare into him and have made him shed tears. I don't know of any other game where the player makes the devil himself cry. The phase also feels special between the main antagonist and Cuphead, with there only being one platform to stand on and the disappearance of the henchmen. After the major journey Cuphead and Mugman went through, the battle ends successfully, with the devil not looking too good. The difficult final fight holds up beautifully.
Is he allergic to salt? Needs to be backed up with salt.
Bland, no salt.
Immediately following the devil, we have Chef Saltbaker, a villain whose battle feels like an adventure. It all begins with Saltbaker in his normal form in the evil chef lair. It then translates into him being this great giant who gets destroyed and becomes nothing but salt, and it's a threatening phase with his former shell present in the background. It then ends real personal within the two cyclones, where it's just Cuphead and Saltbaker's evil little pink heart. All of that is great, but is also elevated by two major elements. The first is the whole twist aspect of it. You first see him as this cool, friendly character. There wasn't much of a reason to suspect him of any wrongdoing beforehand, so returning to the bakery and finding him in this evil state was a really cool surprise. The second aspect of the battle is seeing just how evil this mother is. Look at him hurting those friendly foods. He's such an asshole. And when he gets big, he's got these mad, evil eyes. In the final phase, even his cool little heart looks like a... This gives me great hope that when Cuphead inevitably gets a new game, the next main villain will be outstanding. Such a great boss fight. He is the freaking king of the delicious last course. This German mouse is awesome. The battle begins in his house, and the music kicks in like stuff's about to go down. It looks like he has some war medals and dog tags up on display. He's got this tank he made out of a can with eye holes in it, and he's got his little spiked helmet on. I don't know what his deal is, but it is really cool. The second phase then ensues with the mouse going up and down in his damaged tank, and the bottle cap blades on the sides popping in as obstacles. Then his machine gets stuck and he gets eaten by the cat. And listen to this, he basically does a Tom and Jerry scream. Then you're fighting the cat, who has mice ghosts coming out of his mouth, and after all the chaos and destruction, Cuphead wins, and the death animation shows that the whole time the cat was controlled by the mouse? Amazing twist. And kind of a dark one too, because that means this evil mouse killed his mouse friends and turned them into ghosts. So much to love, great battle here, a memorable twist at the end, and of course this being a whole parallel to Tom and Jerry. It's just too cool. The creativity was off the charts with this one, and while I love this boss for so many reasons, there's one more that I consider even better. I may even consider it
the GOAT! The GOAT!
Let's take a look at it, shall we? The theater fight is absolutely the most creative battle in the game. It feels like a journey, you know? Obviously, this is all just a big performance in front of an audience, but it all begins at the wedding of this man and his crazy wife. After defeating her, she leaves with him, waving her handkerchief at us, essentially saying, "Toodaloo." The scene then changes to her house, with her son and daughter throwing baby bottles out the window, while the woman herself continues to harass us with her umbrella and toy mice and the occasional fans she throws. After this, she turns into a big godlike entity, because duh, of course this is where the story was going to end up, and she sends waves and lightning at us. After accomplishing this, the play is essentially over, but the battle continues, and you gotta fight her a little while longer while she flies in the air and the umbrella spins around. Once she is defeated, you celebrate and laugh at the shocked faces of those in the background. A fantastic adventure all in one boss. But the story may go another way. The husband gets killed at the beginning, with the phase following that now being a nunnery instead of the happy home. After dodging the woman's attacks and the crosses thrown your way, she is once again in this goddess form, but now has her husband by her side, making this phase more difficult. And after defeating these two, the following phase is pretty similar to how it was before, except that the characters in the back being switched up. All of this was really freaking great. The whole concept of a play being a level was fantastic, and it was executed wonderfully. Without a doubt, one of the best ideas for a boss in the whole game. So that's my Cuphead ranking. This was kind of hard. It's like competing with different slices of pizza. It's all great stuff at the end of the day. While making this, I realized I have a great appreciation for spinning backgrounds and bosses with secret phases. I just eat that stuff up. Maybe another day I'll do some more of this type of content, but in the meantime, let me know what else you guys would want to see from me in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching, and subscribe for cups.